My name is Jennifer, and I am a dedicated housewife. I have been married for 20 years but remarried my current husband, who was also on his second marriage when we met. During our relationship, he confessed to having a son who is turning 5. I tried to break up several times after that, but I ended up not being able to move on and we stayed together. Despite the difficulties, since we got married, I've always made a point of taking care of his son as if he were my own. At the time we were married, he was 5 years old and exhibiting typical rebellious adolescent behavior. However, we never had the big confrontations like in the movies, where he would yell things like, "You're not my real mother." I believe we built a happy family together. 2 years after our marriage, I became pregnant and we were blessed with a beautiful baby boy. Our eldest son, James, was a little older than his brother, with a difference of 7 years, but he was always kind and protective like an older brother. Even though I wasn't his biological mother, I was a little worried, but as the old saying goes, it's better to have a baby than to worry about life. Things have a way of working out, as we realized a few years later when our second child was born. As our oldest son entered puberty, he began to reject my presence. The trigger was something truly trivial, something I didn't even realize at the time. However, our oldest son told me that I treated him and his younger brother differently. I tried to explain that wasn't the case, but he wouldn't listen. From that point on, our relationship started to deteriorate, and in his eyes, I was just someone who did the housework, regardless of whether he recognized me as his mother or not. I was determined to be his mother from the day I married my husband until the day he grew up and left home. I pledged to take care of him, no matter how much he resented it. I decided to commit to this wholeheartedly. However, as he went through puberty and his rebellious phase, our relationship took a turn for the worse. Looking back, maybe I should have let things go and not commented, but at the time I just couldn't bring myself to do that. It became common for him to call me out rudely when I was doing laundry or cleaning the house. He would furiously yell at me not to touch his stuff without being asked. Later, he would apologize, probably realizing how disrespectful he had been, but when I would forgive him with a smile, he would become defiant again, saying things like, "First of all, it's your fault for doing things I told you to stop, madam." My husband tried to discipline him, but he behaved well in front of him. Because of this, my husband began to doubt me, saying that James really didn't do what I claimed. I tried recording our interactions to prove it to my husband a few times, but it never worked as something always got in the way or we just didn't have any discussions while I was recording. As time went on, our eldest son came of age and decided to leave home. I remember sighing with relief, thinking I was finally over his parting words. When he left the house, I felt like I didn't have to deal with strange faces anymore. But those words were hard on me, as I've taken care of him every day for the 15 years since we met. He's not a bad boy, although I understood that intellectually, my heart couldn't accept it when he said those words. At this time, our second son, Richard, was entering high school and seemed baffled by his older brother's hatred of me. I decided to tell my youngest son the whole truth about my marriage to his father, and that his older brother was his father's son from a previous marriage. At first, my youngest son was shocked to discover that his older brother was not his blood relative, but he quietly listened to the rest of the story. In the end, he came to terms with the situation, saying, "So that's why his attitude towards his mother has been weird in recent years." I don't regret marrying my husband, but I started to regret taking on the role of mother to the eldest son. Maybe there was a way for us to live together just as housemates, maybe I didn't have to divorce him to recognize me as his mother. Once I started thinking about it, the thoughts didn't stop. A few years after our oldest son left home, we received a message from him that he would be visiting us soon for his wedding performance. The message was transmitted through his younger brother, as I had not received any direct communication. It was because I remembered my oldest son when he was little, when he called me mom and said, "I love you," with a smile. My phone's wallpaper was a picture of my 2 children when they were little, a picture of my eldest son, age 7, holding my youngest newborn son tentatively. If I could go back to that time, I would. I thought as I looked at the photo. Those were really good times, I muttered to myself, and decided to leave the house. My youngest is 18 and graduating from high school next year. He mentioned going to a university with dorms. That night I talked with my husband about our future, about our eldest son. "Today, Jennifer, I am truly sorry. I never believed you. I had no idea our son James could disrespect others in such a way. It's not okay now. Maybe my paternity was also at fault. Although I thought of him as my own son, I suppose I treated him differently. He told me that himself. I wasn't aware of it, but I was taking care of him in my own way. I know better than anyone that you always took care of James like you were his mother. I'm truly grateful for that, but it seems like even that was something he didn't want. It's almost laughable, isn't it? As I made the self-deprecating comment, my husband made a pained face, took my hand and apologized to me over and over again. So I told my husband that I wouldn't be going to a ceremony like he wanted, and that I wanted a divorce. Because I would leave home as soon as our second child came out. I handed him the divorce papers. "Are you serious?" he asked. Of course I would never joke about something like that. "You're right. You are that kind of person," I replied. "I'm really sorry for all the pain I've caused you." He said he didn't need to apologize anymore, and he never regretted marrying me. "Okay, Jennifer, I love you from the bottom of my heart," he said. I love you too. Please look after James and Richard for me." That night, I fell asleep in my husband's arms for the first time since we were married. I managed to sleep soundly for the first time in a long time, comforted by the faint sound of her heartbeat. Several days after our divorce discussion, our second child graduated from high school. And our oldest son's wedding is coming up next week. Our second son was wondering if he should wear his school uniform to the wedding. I found it amusing to see how he prepared for the ceremony. Noticing me smiling at his preparations, he approached me and struck up a conversation. "Mom, are you really not going to attend my brother's wedding?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "He said he didn't want me there, so there's nothing I can do about it. It's his big day, I want him to enjoy it." "But Mom, you're the one who raised him so carefully." "It's okay, Richard, there's no need for you to worry about it." Unconvinced by my words, my second son continued to moan in frustration. It must have been frustrating for him. He knows the good relationship I had with my eldest son. Realizing that the relationship is now hopeless, I prepared to leave the house and settle the divorce. I handed in the divorce papers. "It is serious?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, I'm determined to leave the house," I replied. "I don't know what to say to him," he said in a worried voice. "Don't worry, he's good at expressing his feelings clearly to others, but he might need a little nudging," I said. "Okay, I'll try." "I don't know what happens next," my husband replied. After a while, my youngest son told me that my oldest son's marriage went off without a hitch. I was relieved and asked my youngest son about his impressions of the ceremony. He replied that it was a total disaster. "Serious?" she asked. "Because I had chosen not to attend the wedding, as per my eldest son's wishes." His response took me by surprise, interrupting my thoughts for a moment, but I managed to regain my composure and asked what exactly went wrong. For some reason, he started bragging about it. "You remember, Mom, how you were there when we did the initial meet and greet, right?" "Yes, I remember well," I replied. "Why weren't you at the ceremony?" His wife was everything. "Because I see it, I understand it." My eldest son was making all sorts of excuses, but his wife suddenly suggested cancelling the ceremony, and his parents went into a frenzy. This ceremony somehow started because everyone was already gathered, but along the way, it was a disaster. The bride and groom were shy, and there was a peculiar atmosphere. Spoke on the phone, but when my youngest son told me with a smile that they had reconciled, I believed that everything would be fine from now on. I was determined to really leave them alone this time. "So, Mother, why are you here? Is there something I need to talk to me about?" "Yes, sorry for what I said during the wedding prep. Watching that video message the other day reminded me that I always thought of you as my mother, really, and you always stood up for me, saying I'm your son. I'm very sorry." I gently reached out my hands to my crying son in front of me, wiping the tears that streamed down his cheeks. I was surprised to see a grown man shedding tears, but I thought those tears must be expressing all his feelings. He apologized for the harsh words he had thrown at me. That alone was enough for me. I didn't need anything else. "Thanks for coming. I have pictures of Richard, you looked great." Your girlfriend is beautiful, right? She's a kind and beautiful girl. Take good care of her. Okay, I'll make her the happiest bread in the world. Yes, I absolutely promise. So Mom, this might be asking a lot, but would you please come home? Dad has been sad since you left. It's like when I lost my mother when I can't bear to see it. Your father, I am really begging you to listen to my words, said the eldest son. I decided to go back home. I could not believe that whoever said he loved me was feeling down, as this was a lie told by my son older to make me reconcile with his father. I went home, half doubting, half hoping. When I slowly opened the door and walked in after a long time, I heard a soft crying sound. Jennifer. I gently peeked and there was my husband, phone in hand, shoulders shaking as he cried. I was taken aback for a moment, but it would be weird not to say anything, so I called out to him. Robert. Your body shook. He quickly turned to me, his cheeks were wet with tears reflecting the sunlight, and he quickly wiped his face and tried to act like nothing was wrong, saying what? What's wrong? I couldn't help but laugh. You know, if I said I wanted to come back here, you'd be mad, huh? Her surprised voice was cut off as everything suddenly went dark. It took me a moment to realize that I was enveloped in a warm hug. When I returned the hug and asked if that means everything is okay, he repeatedly nodded his head saying yes, yes in a nasal voice. I have since reconciled with my husband, and that was the last time I saw him cry. Now I travel with him, have dates, and sometimes go out with my eldest son and his wife, spending my time happily. I owe all this happiness to my daughter-in-law Linda. I'm very grateful.